Your broadcast. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, hello. All right. I'm about ready to get started here, but I would like to find out if everyone can hear me. If you can hear me, please press the raise your hand button on the right-hand column there that shows your, oh, good. People already raising their hands saying, yes, I can hear you. Sweet. All right. Well, I am excited to be meeting with you today on this lovely Friday afternoon here in Seattle. It is cloudy and gray and raining a little this morning, so surprise, surprise, I'm in Seattle. Talking to you folks down there in Arizona, you're probably wondering, what is rain? Actually, my dad lives down there. I came down to your local chapter down there and spoke sometime in this past year. Hope some of you were there. If not, I hope to get back down there again soon. So today we'll be talking a little bit about problems that we run into with Agile and maybe what are some of the roots that come from that those problems come from, and what you can do to address those issues when you're trying to implement Agile, typically in a waterfall world, which is kind of my world. That's the tagline for Whitewater projects, is integrating Agile in a waterfall world. And I've given talks about this all over the world, and I love chatting with people about it. So actually, if you could raise your hands, again, if you are currently using Agile in one way or another, I would love to know if you're using Agile right now. I'm seeing some people say yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, oh, wow. A lot of folks. And a lot of folks on the line today. I'm excited about that. I'm glad everybody could make this make-up call. Sorry about the thing on Wednesday. I'm just not sure what happened there. But things are working now, so thank you again for joining me. So I am by nature curious. I am curious about all kinds of things and the way they work and the way they don't work. It's sometimes causes me troubles and sometimes is a very beneficial thing. When I first started doing Agile, I got curious about it, right? You know, what's working, what's not, how does this work? The reason I got doing Agile projects, using Agile and becoming Agile, was I got put onto a software project back in the day, and it was an abysmal failure. I'd been doing traditional waterfall projects in technology world, network designs, network implementations, lots of things around construction IT for several years, and it was, you know, all good. And then I did some software things, and oh my God, it's totally different. How does this stuff work? You can't see it, right? With software, you can't see what you're putting in, and so my first software project was a total flop. I had the classic guy that was helping, that was doing a big part of the coding. Fortunately, it wasn't a huge project, this part of it. This was one part of the rest of it, but this part was important but not large. And I had one coder who was working on it, and he gave me the classic line, right? I bet you could all repeat it. 95% done. I'm 95% done. He was 95% done for literally weeks. And you know, not being a software developer, well, I had done, you know, some programming when I was in junior high and high school on my Commodore VIC-20 and my Commodore 64. For those of you who remember those days, but wow, hello phone. Sorry about that. Different phone ringing. And I hadn't done software development since then. So I couldn't very well go look at his code, but eventually I had to. Eventually I said, okay, what the heck is going on? Because you can't be 95% done for that long. I looked at the code, and it was a mess. Total mess. And I could tell. If I could tell that it was a mess. He had like repeating functions that you should be doing in a nested loop kind of approach, and I knew how to do from junior high programming that he was sequentially programming them individually. So we fired him and got somebody else in to fix it, but we were late and over budget, and it was bad news. So I said, there's got to be a better way to do this. and looked around. Granted, this was like 6, 7 years ago, and looked around the world on the internet. That was kind of this new cool thing. Not that new. But looked around to try and find out, how do people manage software projects? How do they do this? And this Agile thing was looking pretty interesting. The Agile Manifesto was only about 5 years old at that point, so it was written in 2001. And it looked interesting. The Scrum thing looked pretty popular, so I went and took a class on Scrum and found that it was really cool, and have used it on software projects ever since then. I can tell you great stories about the class and things like that. I got to take the class actually from Ken Schwaber, who was one of the originators of Scrum. Ken and Jeff Sutherland came up with Scrum themselves back in the day, but it was great. Learned a lot from Ken. The biggest thing I learned was this incremental delivery approach and delivering according to Ken, every 30 days. Nowadays I do every 14 days, every 2-week sprints typically. But I found sometimes it wouldn't work so well. And it would depend on what the situation was, but some places I'd have these problems, and things wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to deliver. You weren't getting the traction that I knew you could get, and I could get in other places with other companies. And I'm just curious, for those of you who are on the line right now, if you have experienced those things and what you've seen. If you could type into your little questions space, what kinds of problems, I know a lot of you are using Agile, what kind of problems are you looking at that you see in your Agile implementations that are causing you trouble, right? What problems are you running into in your Agile implementations? You're coming to this call going, when Agile breaks, hey, I'm curious, so what are the places where you're seeing Agile breaking? Just type that into your questions space for me so I can address some of those questions. That would be really good. Some people talking about product owners, people not being able to deliver in 2-week sprints. Oh, good. Unavailable or non-committal product owners, yes. Legacy code, oof, painful. User stories are too big, yes. Yeah, long time breaking through those. Projects going on with little direction. Ouch. Ouch. Yeah. Keep typing these things in, because I want you to just, everybody who's got problems that they've been dealing with, because I want to get to the end of this and see how many of these things are addressed by what we talk about in the call today, because I've done this talk before, and just about every single problem that people come up with on these, when I ask this question, is addressed by what we'll talk about here. So by nature, I'm curious, right? I said that to begin with, and that curiosity leads me to asking questions, right? And so I was looking at these places where it's breaking, and going, okay, why does it work in some places and not in, what is this problem that we're running into, right? And what are the pieces of the puzzle that might help explain this? And we'll talk about 4 different pieces of the puzzle, and when we put them together at the end, there'll be this kind of picture that's going to emerge for you. So, common problems and complaints, that's what we're talking about right now. You're pulling those up. Cash rich, but not motivated to rein in delivery. Ooh, interesting. So often we'll run into folks that have no, wrong, or disempowered product owners, right? There's either no product owner around, or they don't really have the power to make the decisions that need to be made by a product owner, or they're just the wrong person, right? You've got somebody who doesn't really understand the product, who's not in the right position to have authority over the product. All these problems with the product owners. Budgets are hard to control, right? Not able to rein things in. I thought I saw somebody talking about budget control, right? Can't predict or control the budgets in some organizations. Scope creep, right? Scope just keeps going on and on. What was that? Project going on and on with little direction, right? That's kind of a scope creep problem. There's going here and there and not really following a scope someplace. Difficult or impossible schedules. Again, going on and on with little direction. That's a great one. Not being able to break stuff down into 2-week sprints. It's difficult to put things into this schedule. And these others that you've talked about here. So why do these things happen, I ask. I just ask myself this question and pulled up some things. So I found this interesting article, and there's a couple of slides here with a bunch of text on them. And I'm not a big bunch of text guy for slides, but I want you to read this stuff with me. This says, the rules are changing. New product development is changing. Companies have discovered that it takes more than just the accepted basics of high quality and low cost in order to excel in today's competitive environment. It takes speed and flexibility. Sounds a lot like agile, doesn't it? Right? It takes the speed and flexibility of change. In this article, it talked about this rugby approach, a holistic approach to the team working together as a whole to push the ball down the field, like in rugby. I don't know if you're familiar with rugby or not, but the Scrum term, actually, if you're familiar with Agile, you're probably familiar with Scrum, and that term Scrum comes from rugby. And a scrum in rugby is that mash of people that are pushing against each other and passing the ball back and forth to push the ball down the field. And that approach, they were saying in this article, was talking about how we're this new approach to developing and delivering new products is working. It's working so much better to, here it says, to be better to serve today's competitive requirements, right? To move things more quickly. You talk about what drives that speed. In this article, again, it's talking about what drives that speed, and it talks about building instability into the system, right, so that you have to constantly be correcting and moving forward. Self-organizing project teams, right? So the self-organization of a team, this is something that comes right out of Scrum. I'm reading this article going, this is good stuff. Overlapping development phases. So I'll show you a picture later about what that looks like, but multi-learning. So you're learning on multiple levels. If you're familiar with a book called Extraordinary Groups. If you're not familiar with that book, write it down. Extraordinary Groups. And that book talks about some common characteristics to high-performing teams. The list actually has a lot of similar things to what's on this list and in this article that I read. And that some of the things in there talked about unexpected learning, right? When we start doing a new project or something, we expect to learn a little bit on that project about what's happening, maybe some new technology, a new business unit. We expect to learn things as we're going through, but in extraordinary groups, you end up with this unique and unexpected learning things you didn't expect to learn initially. Number 5 here in that article, it talked about subtle control. Subtle control. In the Extraordinary Groups book, they talk about just enough structure, right? That same kind of concept of only enough structure, not so much that it's overbearing, but not so little that you're out of control. I heard some of the problems that people are dealing with, but just enough structure. And organizational transfer of learning, so the ability to transfer that learning from individuals to an organization. So it was really, that was an interesting thing. Here it was talking about the different types of product development. Old school product development was the phase gate, right? So you stopped right here in between. I don't know if you can see my marker, but here I'll draw with a pen. Old school, you stopped in between here, and you had a phase gate on these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, between those numbers, you'd stop. The next approach was something that kind of overlapping the phases. So as you were finishing up initiation, you would start into your requirements, and finishing up requirements, you'd start into your architecture and design, finishing up architecture and design. You're going into build, test, deploy, right? So you kind of had these phases. A lot of us are familiar with this. This is traditional, pretty traditional waterfall project management. But this one here is what they found in these unique new product development things, where they're overlapping these phases, and they're all kind of coming together here toward the end. They're not individual phases anymore at all, but kind of mushed together. And the interesting thing about that article was it was called the new product development game. And I suggest everybody and anybody read that article. You can go out and find it. It's in the Harvard Business Review, January, February of 1986. So this agile thing, as I'm trying to peel the onion right here, trying to figure out agile, I looked and found this article about Scrum. The first time Scrum is applied to new product development was 1986. This was way before Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland started doing Scrum on software development projects at Easel. That was where they did their first Scrum project, was Easel. This Harvard Business Review article, January, February of 1986, right? Nothing in this article talked about software, right? In 86, we didn't have that kind of software that we have today. We didn't have the kinds of object-oriented programming that we've got going on in new approaches to programming. This article was about printers. It was about cameras, 35 millimeter cameras, which they don't even make much anymore. Camera lenses. And I hope you can all still see this. I'm worrying. Okay, there it is. Whew. I just looked over and my little sidebar was missing, so I was worried. Okay. Can everybody still see my screen? I want to make sure. If you raise your hand, please, if you can still see the screen. Got some hands raising. Can I see some hands? Okay, you can. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. So this Harvard Business Review 1986 article was the first time Scrum was talked about. Interesting, interesting, interesting. So it really isn't this software thing so much as it is a product development approach that is applicable to anything. So that was an interesting piece. It was a product development approach that was developed back in the 80s, mid 80s. That was a piece of the puzzle that, kind of, okay, I've got that. Just think about that. Then I started thinking about what's the history here? If that article was written in 86, right? What's the history then of the influences around this development of Agile? Where did this all come from? So here's a timeline for you, and you can probably recognize that timeline. It would be the stock exchange. This is actually the not the Dow Jones, but the NASDAQ, which has more tech stocks in it. So that's why the dot-com bubble shows up here. And if you look at, oops. First Scrum project here was in 93, and that was at Easel. And then we have the dot-com bubble, and March 10th of 2000. So I started doing this research. Okay, what are these things? When was that first Scrum project? What was going on? Oh, there's the dot-com thing. Really interesting thing though was the Agile Manifesto, and if you're not familiar with the Agile Manifesto, I'll tell you a little bit about it. The Agile Manifesto was a bunch of guys got together, basically, who were doing software development and wrote the Agile Manifesto. Most people these days who are involved in Agile will point to the Agile Manifesto as one of those things that was foundational and that we point to as, if you're being Agile, you're doing these things, right? And they point to the 4 values and the 12 principles on the Agile Manifesto. I'm not going to go over those. You can go look at it. Go to agilemanifesto.org. No dashes, nothing, just one word, agilemanifesto.org. That manifesto was written right here, 2001. I said to myself, why? This is a very interesting relationship. If you bound the .com bubble here, the Agile Manifesto was written in February of 2001. Now, in March of 2000, the .com bubble popped. Right, that was the peak day. Then it crashed on the 10th. Right, it was peaking on the 11th or 10th or 9th and crashed on the 10th. And I look at that and I think, now, what I want you to do is I'd like you to sit there at your desks or wherever you are and close your eyes. Got them closed? I'll wait for you to close them all. Okay, like I can see you or something. Imagine now you're for yourself. Imagine yourself as a software developer. Now, I know this was promoted through PMI, so most of you are project managers, but imagine that you're a software developer. I'm a project manager too. So imagine a software developer in 2000, right? It's January of 2000. The stock market's going crazy. You're part of some .com that's woohoo humongous and it's going crazy, going really well for you. You got venture capitalists throwing money at you so you can go have parties and do crazy .com things that they were doing, having going out for parties every night and living in posh apartments and just having a good time, right? And the new economy, right? This is all about the new economy where if we build these things, now I don't really know how we're going to sell it, but this is really cool stuff. I'll build this thing and we've got lots of people coming to it. Yeah, nobody's buying yet, but they will. They'll start buying. As soon as we get our numbers up, then it's just a numbers thing. Then we'll get enough people buying, right? And this is the mentality, remember? The heady days of the .com bubble. And then the .com bursts, right? March 10th, 11th, 12th. The market's crashing. April, May, June. Now it's Christmas in 2000. Now it's January of 2001, right? Christmas and all that, you can kind of get your way through that and think, okay, it's going to get better after Christmas. We'll come back up. January, it's not happening. Now what do you have? Now you have those same venture capitalists that were throwing money at you before are coming back to you and saying, I want my money. I gave you millions. I want to see some return on that. Where are the customers you said would be coming? You said if we got enough hits, they'd come. You've got the hits. Where are they? Where's my money? And the people in those .coms are going, shoot. Probably not using that kind of language, but not that polite. Going, we have to figure this out. We need to figure out what our customers really want. Where are our customers' needs? How do we please our customers? And you as a software developer or software product owner looking around and going, dang, who knows about this? Because I've just been doing this crazy software development, and who knows about customer value, customer interests? How do I figure out what the customers want? And you look back and you learn about this thing called lean, right? Sorry to change those slides. Lean, those guys know about customer value. Their whole focus is customer value. They're getting rid of waste. We've got a lot of waste. Lots of waste in that dot-com bubble. We got to get rid of the waste, and we got to focus on customer value. Value, 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 right? Boom. That was what one of the things, at least. There's lots of influences that drove to this, but that's one of the things. And if you listen on the Whitewater Project's website and go to my blog section and look and listen to the podcasts that I have with these gentlemen, I have 4 or 5 interviews with some of the guys. These are the 17 guys that wrote the Agile Manifesto. And I have interviews with them, and a lot of them in those interviews talk about lean. They talk about the influences of lean and how that influenced them for becoming this, creating this thing that we now call Agile. When they met in Snowbird, Utah in February of 2001, it was called actually the Lightweight Development Practices Conference. And a really funny one to listen to is the interview with Ari Van Benkum, who is this guy right here, whose face I just colored yellow. Ari Van Benkum, he is the only one who actually worked for a methodology organization. He was from the DSDM consortium in Europe. And he came over to the Lightweight Development Conference, expecting to attend a couple 100-person conference and, be a speaker there. And there was, 17 guys hanging out in a hotel room in Snowbird. He's like, "Where's the conference? Where's everybody?" "Oh, no, it's just us." But these guys were all, other than him, software developers. And they were all looking for ways to talk about this thing that they'd been doing, right? This thing that they'd been doing that had some common roots. And I will go over just the manifesto itself. When they came together, they eventually came up with the word Agile, and they came to these 4 principles, right? These 4 values, not principles. That we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We value working software over comprehensive documentation. We value customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. Now, the first time I read that as a project manager, it kind of threw me off because I like my processes and tools. And documentation is important. Contracts are valuable, and we should have them. Why do I have all these phone calls all of a sudden? And following a plan is important, right? And as project managers, you're all nodding. Yeah, these are important things. Why don't we, we have to have these things. Well, there's a piece of this that's often forgotten, and that's the little phrase right there at the very bottom. So while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So I wanted to share this little bit with you because you'll often hear people say, "Well, we're Agile, so we don't do planning." They don't know what they're talking about. Those 17 guys, when you talk to them, they're like, "No, of course we do planning. We would never get a contract if we didn't do planning." Right? And oh, by the way, they do negotiate contracts. There's a good 15 different ways you can negotiate contracts in an Agile world. Different ways that I will go over in a class if you wanted to take a class with me. But there's different ways of doing things within an Agile context. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. It doesn't say that processes and tools are bad. As a matter of fact, they have all their own processes, right? They're just lightweight processes. That doesn't say that you don't do documentation. It just says that software is more important, right? This in particular is talking about requirements documentation, not necessarily like working software documentation for like a user manual or an as-built kinds of things. Those things are important and become part of your definition of done, but this is important that you read that bottom part of it, that people remember that there's value in the things on the right. There's just more value in the things on the left. So it was interesting to me that was a quick aside. Interesting to me, that .com thing. It kind of came to be through that .com bubble when they were trying to make these new products and looking at lean. I look at then I started looking at the agile practices themselves, right? What are some of the practices that are performed? We have organizational practices of having people co-located, having the product owners heavily involved, having automated deployments and coding standards. We have team practices. I can go through all of them. We have team practices, right? Paired programming, the concept of collective code ownership. If you haven't heard of that, it's the idea that it's not just one person, right? You don't own the checkout page and you own login and you own the shopping cart. No, everyone owns everything so that everyone can work on everything. Otherwise, you wind up getting cornered, right? Somebody walks out of your company to go to another company, and suddenly you've lost all that intellectual capital. So the collective code ownership is important, not only for that part of it, but because we're a team, right? A real team who works together, holding daily stand-ups, doing retrospectives to constantly try and improve. These things are all part of the team practices. And it goes down into personal practices, right? Personal responsibility. If you want to learn great stuff about personal responsibility, check out Christopher Avery. It's Christopher Avery, A-V-E-R-Y, Avery. Check him out. He is awesome, good friend of mine. But he wrote a book called Teamwork is an Individual Skill, and now he is promoting something called the Leadership Gift. Great stuff for project managers, because as project managers, we are project leaders. Was at the Global Congress, and one of the people who was a keynote there said, you manage things and you lead people. So you are project leaders, not project managers. Unit tests, communication, shared leadership. So we looked at these agile practices, and then if you go to DSDM has this great bit about the iron triangle, talking again about how does agile work itself. Those practices are different from traditional project management, from traditional delivery based on I'm going to tell you what to do kind of delivery, which isn't always what project management is, but it can be. Then this iron triangle. So this is our classic thing, right? Scope, schedule, budget. Typically, we fix our scope, usually either at a high level in the charter or at a deeper level in the initial project plan, right? So you detail out what's in scope, what's out of scope, specific, very clear, detailing what's in and out, and then you have very strict change control. And then off of that, you estimate schedule and budget based on that scope and based on the one or the other. You can estimate schedule and adjust budget, or estimate budget and adjust schedule, but usually the scope stays pretty fixed. DSDM says, you know what, actually in an agile world, we flip that on its head. And we fix the schedule and budget, meaning we have regular releases, monthly, quarterly, and we fix the budget in that here's the number of people. They are going to be dedicated to this project and working on it full time, right? And we estimate the scope. We think we can get about this much scope done because there's so much different in software development. There's so much that's unknown, so many problems that you turn over a rock and it's crazy ugly under there. It's the problem that you thought. This happened to me with a team I'm coaching just in the last sprint they did. So they're on 3-week sprints. We'll get them to 2-week sprints soon, but January. They were doing 3-week sprints. They had a brand new requirement that was brought in, which is great. We don't have any problem with that in an agile world, but they didn't really understand it. So they're like, okay, how do we do this thing? And it looked pretty straightforward. They estimated that they could get it done within 3 weeks. So they brought it in, and they started tearing it apart to figure out the details. And I can't really explain what it is other than there were complicated, it was international trade and complicated tax implications about what was going on. And they really thought they could get it done within the 3 weeks, found out that, wow, the way our system is currently architected does not lend itself to this kind of taxation and this kind of processing of the payments. And so it was incredibly huge. And that happens all the time, that kind of stuff, where we think it's one thing and it winds up being something else. And that's why we estimate scope, because if I am on a 2-year project and I try and tell you exactly what that thing is, it's going to be out there. Pardon me. It's going to be out there 2 years from now, or maybe even just a year and a half from now, so 6 months toward the end of the project. I have no idea. And we might run into 12 of these things with the tax complications between now and then. I can give you a good estimate, though. I can estimate that and refine that estimate over time using velocity and points-based estimation, but that's not the intent of this conversation. But that kind of thing helps you estimate that scope better and better over time. And so it turns the iron triangle kind of upside down, which actually makes a lot of sense in an environment that is incredibly volatile like this, where things are changing quickly, so you can change your scope, where problems may look simple at first and then be real complicated. You know, pouring concrete has some fairly straight parameters, right? It's the temperature and the humidity and the thickness of the concrete that you're pouring, maybe a couple of other variables, but they're well known. It's a chemical process, right? Concrete doesn't dry; it hardens through the chemical reaction of the properties within the concrete. So it's well known how that happens. Software development, this is more art than science in a lot of cases, and so we have to take a more general approach to that, looking at the scope. All right. So I looked at those things. Interesting. Another piece of the puzzle. You flip that iron triangle upside down. You're not fixing the scope anymore. You're estimating the scope because it's so volatile in these cases. Another piece of the puzzle. And this is the last piece of the puzzle, and you may have heard this before from me if you had seen me at one of the global congresses. But this was the piece that kind of pulls it together. Project management. I love asking this question because I gave a talk that had this couple slides in it at a couple of global congresses, and I asked the question, okay, somebody define for me project management. You're all PMPs in here. What's the definition? Because you all had it on the test. And, you know, the definition is this: is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. But nobody in the room can remember the definition. This is the definition, right? Project management is a temporary endeavor that creates a unique something, product, service, or result. This is the piece that pulls some of these pieces together, and think about the other three when we pull it together. Agile was never created to do this. It was never intended to do this. I believe that this misperception that we can use Agile to do project management, to do project delivery, is one of the fundamental problems that results in almost all of the problems that you brought up today. With stories being too big, non-committed product owners, legacy code, all of these things can go back to why Agile doesn't work well in these organizations, in these projects, is that Agile was never intended to work projects. Agile was intended to be a product management tool. Product management. Okay, what the hell is product management? Pardon my language. Product management, comes out of Wikipedia, so I know it's true. Product management is an organizational lifecycle function, right? It's not just a delivery of a unique product, service, or result, but it's a long-term organizational lifecycle where you are looking at something really big and you're encompassing the entire life cycle of that. So think about, since I'm from Seattle and Redmond is just down the road from me, think about Windows, okay? A lot of you are watching this on a Windows machine or you're on a Mac. Think about Windows for a minute. Windows 95, right? Then it became Windows 98. Then it was, Windows 3.1, that was the first one. Then Windows 3.1.1, then 95, 98, 2000, blah, 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 on and on and on, right? Each of those you could consider as a project within the product management lifecycle. Windows is a product. When will it be discontinued? I don't know. So it doesn't really have it's not a unique project with a defined beginning and end, right? It goes on and on and on and on and on and on until that product's not really needed anymore by the industry. Windows is still needed. Unless you're on a Mac person, then it's debatable whether Windows is needed. But as an industry, right, you look at that product, there it goes on the long term. That is what Agile was created to do. Agile was created to help us deliver products over the long term. Now remember that article at the beginning, right? Oh, before I get back there, I'm not going to pull it all together yet. Think about this. The differences between project management and product management. Okay? Project management, in the scope, you have a fixed set of features. You defined it in your charter and in your planning document, right? In your project plan, the documentation, not the Gantt chart. Remember, project plan is that document. You defined it in the project plan. Here's the stuff that's in, here's the stuff that's out. A product like Windows 3.1 is an ongoing set of features. I will guarantee you that Windows product had in its life cycle a plan for networking. It did. We got it in Windows 3.1. Why didn't we get it in 3.1? I mean, we got it in 3.1.1. Why didn't we get it in 3.1? We didn't get it in 3.1 because they didn't finish it in time. They got it to us in 3.1.1, the release just a little while after that, because it was on this ongoing list, and they got to it next, right? Think about a product backlog. If you're familiar with Agile, like most of you were saying you were, if you're familiar with it, you have a product backlog. That product backlog goes on and on forever. If you don't get to it in this release, the December release, right, then you'll get to it in the January release. Don't get to it in January, we'll get to it in February. If we don't get to it before the end of the year, then it wasn't very important to the business because it didn't get moved up in the list. But it's not a fixed set of features, right? Schedules, start date, end date. I have my schedule. We start this project when they sign the charter. We end this project on the date that we go live. Well, and finish up support. Go live support and hand off to production. Product management doesn't have that. Product management has release after release after release. Very different. Product management, people doing the releases are often people who are providing support for the ongoing product. They're intimate with the product as it stands and as it grows. Budgeting, this is the one that kills a lot of us project managers, right? We managed the snot out of our budgets on our projects. I know I did when I was doing traditional projects. We have to be really careful about what we say no to, what we say yes to, whether that piece is in or out of scope, whether that person works overtime or not overtime. The fact is, in product development, I know I have next year, unless they're discontinuing the product, and I would know that by now. I know that next year's coming, and I know that I have a budget next year. So I'm not really worried that I didn't get networking into 3.1. I can get it in 3.1.1, right? It's a cyclical thing. Next year I'm going to get budget 2, and the year after that I'll get budget 2, especially if I'm delivering value. So I want to focus on value, deliver it fast, and then I will be continuing to get more budget. Amazing how this all makes, all of the agile things that we talk about make sense when you're talking product management, not project management. Project management frustrates the snot out of you when you're trying to use agile, right? Because you have a fixed set of features. So this concept of, yeah, you can change the backlog, we'll just put it in the backlog and we'll get to it. That does not work on a fixed project, right? We have to do change control, and we do, because your budget is fixed. If your budget is fixed and you're not going to get it again, and that happens on most projects, right? You get, this is your budget, one-time budget, and you will not get more. And your sponsors know that, and so they try and cram as much as they can into that project because they know they're not getting a budget next year. They know they're not going to get another project to do this. Or if they do, they're going to have to work real hard to get it. So I'm going to cram as much as I can in. Totally different mentality when you're doing product management for something that is a product, right? We talk about the types of products, but that mindset completely changes what you have to deal with. So this was the fourth little piece of the puzzle, that it's product, not projects, that were intended to be developed, managed with Agile. Then everything kind of falls into place, right? You have this customer focus. If you have a customer focus like the lean approach that they looked at after the dot-com bubble burst, then you have this role of a product owner. Look at that for a minute. The role of the product owner. Every agile approach that we have out there right now that I'm aware of has a role similar to the product owner. It may not be labeled that, but it's a customer, the customer proxy, or the product owner. You don't have that on projects, right? You don't have that at all. What you have is someone who has a full-time job doing something else, and we say, hey, here's this label to put on your desk that says product owner. Do that too. It's a full-time job, but do it along with your other job. Is there any wonder why we don't have the right product owners on these projects that we're doing? This person has a full-time job, and you want them to do the full-time job of someone else? All right, the person that is the product owner for Windows or Word or iOS, they have on their desk next to their name says product owner, right? John Smith, product owner for Windows. It doesn't say software department manager or sales executive / product owner, right? That's not where it's intended to be. It's intended to be in a product management. Budgets, hard to control. Well, that's because you're trying to do Agile where it's not intended to live, right? If you're trying to control the budget like a project when really it's designed to manage products where you don't have to worry so much about the budget because it's an ongoing thing, you're going to get more next year, then there's your struggle right there. Scope creep. Can't worry about scope creep if you're doing, oh, you can, but you don't need to worry about it if you're doing product management. You just need to worry about when you're delivering, not if you're going to deliver it. Project schedules, right? I want to look back at some of the questions that we had before. Legacy code. Lengthy functions, too big enhancements. Dev says, cannot do this in 2-week sprints. Let's see, how does that fit? I'll back up here to these 4 things. Let's see, new product development. Okay, well, it's not really made for legacy code, right? Agile itself was developed around the concept of developing greenfield. So they're absolutely right. Legacy code is difficult or impossible to break apart into 2-week sprints. You might consider looking at something called Kanban, because there you can have things that take longer than 2 weeks and shorter than 2 weeks, and you can intermingle them together. And we could talk about that if you wanted to offline. but Kanban's something that might work for you. But Kanban is something that we've created recently. It's not one of the original Agile things, and it's the thing you're running into there is it's for new product development, right? Unavailable or non-committal product owners. I think we talked about that, right? If you've got a product owner who's not available, it's probably because they have a full-time job doing something else. Am I right? They're the manager of a department. They're the vice president of some division. Something else is taking up their time, because if they were the true product owner, really product owner of that product, they would be available. They would make themselves available because that is their job. A true product owner who is not constantly coming up with new ideas and adding to your scope should be fired, right? Because the job of a product owner is to expand and create more value for their customer, expand the product and create more value for the customer. So that's what they should be doing. If they're not doing that, if they're doing what we want on a project, which is controlling the scope and not adding new things, they should be fired. So there's a fundamental problem with product owners. Stories are too big, and we have a tough time breaking them down into usable stories to get done in a 2-week sprint. We could probably talk about why that is, but again, we talked about new product development. That may just be an education problem. If you are doing new product development, Leslie, then that's an education issue, because I've never found a story that I can't break down further, especially in greenfield stuff. In legacy code, you're right. The story might be small enough, but it's so hard to break out to reverse engineer the legacy code that it becomes a problem. But if you're doing greenfield, that there's just an education problem that we need to help people understand how to break things down better, how to get them smaller. There's a great diagram on how to break down stories. If you just Google breaking down stories or how to break down stories, you can find it. It's a PDF. It has 10 different ways of breaking stories down. It's really good. So take a look at that one. Talks about different things like breaking stories on data types. If there's different data types, breaking stories on business requirement, like business feature functions, breaking stories on test types, breaking stories on there's just a dozen different ways of doing it. I think it's 10 actually, not a dozen. But it's a really good, just a one-sheeter that you can have with you when you're trying to break down stories. Project going on and on with little direction. So that's two things, I think. You have going on and on is one, and that's not a problem if it's a product. That's exactly what it should be doing. The little direction, I would imagine you're dealing with the product owner problem, right? Where the product owner has something else that's their real day job that they should be doing, and they're not paying attention to this product to manage. They may also not be versed in some of the lean concepts of looking at customer value and measuring customer value. You might want to look at something called a lean startup. There's a book called Lean Startup. You don't have to be a startup to have the principles apply, especially the principles that he talks about measurement of progress, measurement of success. I think most project managers, lean, agile, or not, traditional, would do well to read the Lean Startup just to learn about the concept of measuring success of a project, right? Because he does it in short iterations, measuring very quickly true customer value, right? Verifiable customer value. Unable to see what other people are. Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm reading them, so you're not able to see other people's things that they're typing because that's the way that this is set up. Cash-rich company not motivated to rein in delivery. We'd have to talk about what was the problem. If they're cash-rich, I'd love to have some. No, I'm just kidding. No, but really, we could talk about what that means and whether they're really focusing again on customer value. What is what is it that the customers are looking for, and what do they want out of it, right? That's where I would start on that one, Diane. So that's that's the four pieces. If you look at anything that you're doing right now that is not new product development, that has a fixed scope and doesn't flip the triangle, if you're thinking about it from the perspective of being that .com person, look at Lean. Learn everything you can about Lean, and consider whether what you're doing is a project or a product. Now, I say all that to say, not to say that it won't work in these contexts. I say it to make you aware. Because if you're not aware, you can't do anything about it. And I know we're running out of time here, but this is my last couple of slides. What do you do about it? Well, you can be aware of it and understand that, it wasn't designed to do this. You can still get huge value out of Agile. You can still deliver in small increments and manage scope. What you won't get is that flexibility, right? The ability to adapt. And I wouldn't say you could call yourself Agile. You could call yourself incremental. You could call yourself whatever you want to say. But look at the values that you can get out of incremental delivery, out of high-performing teams. Remember the book, Extraordinary Groups. Look at those things. You can still get value out of most of the things that we have in Agile. You just can't get all of it. So don't expect to be able to have the flexible schedule if you're on a fixed schedule. Don't expect to be, or if you're on a fixed scope, right? Don't expect to be able to throw things in and out of scope if they want you to control scope. Just be aware of that and say, okay, we can't do that part of Agile, and we're going to lose that value. The ability to quickly adapt to our customers' demands is out of our scope because that's not something that we're allowed to do in our organizational structure. But be aware of those things. And now you've got some context with these four elements that says, oh, this is some of what the value that comes from truly implementing Agile and where my limitations are within a project structure. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. You can learn more, though, too. The Certified Agile Practitioner is the Agile Certified Practitioner, ACP, is a new certification through PMI. And most of you are from PMI, I believe. And this is not a project manager certification, but project managers are getting it a lot. There are over 1,500 of us now, and I am the co-chair, or the co-lead for the ACP content support team for PMI in our Agile community of practice. So if you go to pmi.org and you go to our community of practice, check out the Agile community of practice. Anybody can go in there and look at the stuff who's a member of PMI. Check it out. The Agile Certified Practitioner helps you tell other people who may be looking for a job or when you're looking for a job or something like that, that you know your stuff, right? More than a Scrum Master certification, which basically used to be you took a 2-day class and took a no-fail test. Now it's you take a 2-day class and you take a 25-question failable test. But it's still just 25 questions in a 2-day class. You don't have to have any experience. For the ACP, we have some requirements that say you have to have 2,000 hours of project experience and 1,500 hours of Agile experience. And so if you have those, that's exciting because you can get the ACP. I like to compare it to the CSP, the Certified Scrum Professional, rather than the CSM, Certified Scrum Master. The CSP is the more professional certification, Certified Scrum Professional. But it's deep in Scrum, where the ACP is wide domain knowledge about Agile. So it really says, I know Agile. If you are from a Scrum shop and you believe that your career is going to be doing Scrum, get the CSP. Go for that one because that's the better certification for you. But if you're not sure and if you want to learn things like Kanban, like I was talking about earlier in this call, then you need to be looking at the ACP because it's a broader certification that tells the world that you're well-versed in Agile as opposed to well-versed in just one methodology. This is me. I hope you will follow me on Twitter. I'm at Joseph_Flahiff. Check out whitewaterprojects.com. I teach classes around the world. I'll be in Norway twice in this next year, doing classes here in Seattle, maybe doing one down there in Arizona soon if I can get it scheduled up. Thank you all for joining me today, and just send me any comments or questions that you have. I'd love to stay in touch. All right, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.